The Growth Happens Dawn to Dusk podcast with Matt Devitt. He talks with people about their journey, where they succeeded and failed, to help others on their quest. We're all on a journey that starts and ends every day. This is when we grow, between dawn and dusk. And now, your host, Matt Devitt.
Hey, how's it going out there? Thanks for stopping by. Welcome to another edition of the Growth Happens Dawn to Dusk podcast. I have an awesome guest, good friend of mine, Jacob Hunt, who's on the show today. And we are going to talk about a lot of ranging issues in a very short period of time. So I caught up with Jacob while he was driving, and we talked about how he's an instructor for concealed carry, how he got into that, which is pretty interesting in and of itself. His thoughts on why he started and ended a podcast, which was, I found it pretty interesting. And an interesting kind of a rabbit hole, I guess we go down with regards to having discussions with people and why it's so hard nowadays to really get into that nitty gritty, that uncomfortable kind of period where you sometimes need to get to in order to get that idea to really take shape. So awesome podcast with Jacob. Definitely want to thank him for his time. And if you guys are enjoying this, please leave a comment, a like, 5-star review, however you're viewing this. I'm trying to get it out to more distribution sites. So right now we're on podcast. We're on Spotify, Pippa, their native page. We got that going as well. And I'm looking to push it out to Stitcher and a couple of others. So any insight you guys can give me will definitely be appreciated. And you can follow me on the social media sites all over the place, mostly under Matt Devitt or Devitt Matt, one of those combinations. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, so on and so forth. So anyways, without further ado, Jacob Hunt. So Jacob Hunt, thank you very much for being on the show. Appreciate you taking up my invitation to come and just talk about pretty much whatever we want to talk about on your drive down to Lexington. So thanks for the time.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
No problem. So let's see here. So we've worked together in one of my many jobs I've had in my very short and what I feel is illustrious career. And wanted to reach back out to you. You're an interesting guy, Marine, well, previously a Marine, but I believe once a Marine, always a Marine, as I've been told. You do concealed carry teaching. You do, what is it, perimeter gas testing right now for manufacturing facilities?
Yeah, I work at an environmental monitoring company. So we provide the tools that industry needs to maintain their compliance with federal and state and local regulation for the environment.
Right on. That's a fun job and a very nice elevator pitch that feels like that's been polished a couple of times. That was very well put together.
Well, people, and you're from a similar industry, and like you said, we work together. When people ask you what you do for a living, it's like, okay, do I want to go through the 40-minute explanation that they're going to zone out in 30 seconds later, or can I just, boil it down to, in ways that most people understand? And that's I've tuned that up for that. So if it sounds like an elevator pitch, that's kind of what it is.
I completely agree. I mean, I've been on planes and airports where people go, so what do you, once they find out I'm an engineer, they're like, well, what do you do? What do you work on? And I have the same feeling in my head. Like one side wants to be like, hey, you want to learn about a baghouse and, filtration and blah, 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 blah. And the other side of me just basically says, I work with heavy industry to keep the air clean for the communities they work in, and just leave it at that. It's just, and I kind of let them decide, do you really want to peel that onion and get into it? Or were we just, as Tyler Durden would say, are we just single serving friends on this flight? And that's about all we need to talk about. So
absolutely. It's funny, when I worked in market research data way back in the olden days, I worked for the Nielsen Company, and my dad, one time I was sitting in a living room with my dad, short story here, and he said, so what exactly do you do? And I started telling him about UPCs and about sales, collection at the register tapes and all this stuff about Nielsen data. And he literally fell asleep while I was telling him what I did for a living, my own dad. So I said, you know what? I got to figure out a way to explain this ridiculously, absurdly complex thing that I do in a simple way that doesn't make people literally fall asleep in front of my face. And that served me well because now I can do it in this industry too.
When your dad was sawing logs as you were going into your what you're pouring your heart into, did at any point when you saw him sleeping, did you kind of take a step back and go, should I really be as excited as I am about this job?
You remember the Friends episode? They were trying to do almost like charades or like a game show quiz thing, and they asked what Chandler did for a living, and they said he was a transponster because they couldn't figure out exactly what he did, and that's what I did when I was at Nielsen. And when I saw that, I was like, that's perfect. No one has any idea what I do for a living, and I'm going to put them all to sleep if I try to explain it, so I have to figure out some kind of way to do it. And yeah, and the whole time, when I worked for them, I knew in my heart, I was just out of the Marine Corps, and I knew in my heart, I said, if I have to sit here and just page through Excel spreadsheets 10 hours a day for the next 40 years of my life, that something's got to give. And yeah, so no, I totally understood why he fell asleep.
Yeah, I guess it was a almost not really almost, but it was definitely kind of a vote towards, I probably should find something else to do. Deep down inside, it was that silent vote that he gave you of, do you really want to do this the rest of your life? It's a confirmation, I guess.
I don't get it. Yeah.
That's funny.
It's absolutely true. Yeah.
So, and the other point I wanted to bring up, though, we were getting into this before we started the call, but I was going to say you were a podcaster, but it sounds like that's been retired for a little bit. Just because kind of like we were talking about, you were enjoying talking about current events and politics and things like that until it seems like it just kept following you home with, friends and family that didn't want to let topics die. And so you just hung it up, which I don't blame you.
Yeah, the environment is so sensitive, and that's kind of the reason why I wanted to do the podcast in the first place. So a friend of mine from when I moved from market research into advertising, friend of mine, she's an African American woman. We would always somehow, she worked at the first agency that I went to, advertising agency. We would always somehow end up talking, and sometimes arguing, but always in a friendly way, about whatever the current event was, especially when it came to race, gender, or that kind of stuff. So time went on and on and on, and I left the industry. And I was on my way to work one day, and I said, you know what? I should start a podcast with Kristen, and we could just have those same conversations, but put them out into the world. And we actually did a few podcasts that I didn't publish because the conversation just went to this place where it just was so uncomfortable and almost argumentative, and we were like scowling at each other across the desk. And this is not what I wanted this to be. And when the ones that did go out, when I was getting feedback from them, I was like, this is not what I wanted. I did not want this to be fuel for the fire. The idea, politics and current events. The idea of this was two people from completely different perspectives to find some common ground. And when we did the lighthearted stuff, it was great. I mean, I was in tears laughing, and those are the ones that were published, and you can still find them at Position of Ignorance anywhere you go to look for podcasts. But serious stuff and the stuff that I was really most interested in, we couldn't even put it out because it was just it got ridiculous, and then it was following me home, and I'm supposed to be doing my work. I'm supposed to be enjoying time with my kids or going to sports things. And the whole time, my brain is just churning, like re-arguing the argument. Oh, I should have said this, and she said this, but I know she really meant that, and it just got ugly. And the same thing happened on my personal Facebook page. I had to pull the plug on any kind of serious discussion there as well, because it's so polarized and it's just gross, and like I feel like I want to take a shower just talking about it right now. And so I pulled the plug there too. And yeah, so there are some. It's called a position of ignorance. Find it on Stitcher and find it on Podbean. It's out there. You can listen to the ones that I thought were great and fun and you can put online. But the real heavy duty stuff, you're not going to find it. With the exception of sexual assault or sexual harassment. And that one was kind of the beginning of the end. So it's out there. I just don't do it anymore.
Right. So your co-host, Kristen, I think you said her name was. Yep. You guys still friends? I mean, is that still a good relationship?
Yeah. She I talked to her and you know, she said, "You're breaking up with me," and I said, "I am, but you know, if you want to continue this with another co-host, please, you know, be my guest." And I really wish she would, because I think the premise has merit. It's just maybe I'm just not the guy. And another reason is that with my kids, I have two boys and they are in the sports mode, the kind of time of their life, and I literally just don't have time for it. And you know, and I wish Kristen the best. We're still friends. We still argue on Facebook Messenger when something comes up, and we have great conversations. I learn something, she pretends to learn something, and it goes right back to where she started. But no, Kristen and I are definitely still friends.
So in kind of looking at the relationships that is there, what do you think that made it between you two? So if we kind of talk about generalities as far as people having, we'll call it what it is, constructive discourse over a topic in a way, or maybe just hilarious agreement and, you know, going down the rabbit hole to see who can make the other person laugh more. But what was it about you two? Like, what were some of the general things that way back in the day when you were working in marketing that, you know, kind of brought this about between the two of you as kind of like universal truths, like in the sense of, okay, when I see people with said personality, I'm pretty sure we can have an open, honest discourse where we can hold opposite and opposing views, you know, but still, you know, wave at each other the next time we see, you know, the person pass by, and no hard feelings.
It's tough and it's rare, and that's one of the reasons why I thought that Kristen and I could actually do this together. She did reception work, and she would be sitting at the big desk, and she would just be spouting an opinion to someone who was, you know, someone else in the place, someone who agreed with her. And I would just come up and kind of make like a little flip remark or something like that. And she would say, "Oh, no, you just didn't say that." And we'd all laugh. And then it kind of rolled from there. And whenever something would come up, I remember students at UC Berkeley, there was like a caucus of, they called themselves Black something, I don't really remember what it was, but African American students at Berkeley, I think it was Berkeley, they decided to self-segregate. They wanted Black-only dorms. They wanted Black-only common areas. They wanted, you know, Black-only this and that. And, you know, at the time, I really didn't hold back too much. So I went on Facebook and I posted a link to the article, and I said, you know, old George Wallace is grinning ear to ear right now because we have segregation now, segregation forever. And she responded, you know, "I understand what you're saying, but I get it." And then we jumped over to Messenger, and I just thought, you know what? I gotta know I got to know what you get about segregating races on a college campus. And it just went from there. But the key to the whole thing, I think, more to answer your question, the key to the whole thing was keep a good humor and be respectful, and that's the big one. You have to find two people who are confident in their point of view and who are willing to engage in the conversation, but not let the conversation devolve into name calling and shouting and being ridiculous. And that was always the thing. We always respected one another's opinion, even though, in my mind, she couldn't be any more wrong, and vice versa. And that was the key to it. I don't know how you instill that in others, and social media just makes it so much worse because people are relatively anonymous. I always said that, if you had to say the things you said on social media when you're looking in someone's eye, you would probably change your tone quite a bit. So go from that into, let's do a podcast where we literally sit across from each other at the table, we have to look each other in the face while we're talking about these controversial things. It's a whole different animal than doing it online. I hope that answers your question.
No, that was yeah. I mean, that's right on topic from my standpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, it really comes down to, like you said, being, like confident in the knowledge, but also a lot of trust within the two people that you can literally push the other person's button because you want to, in a way, if you're doing it respectfully, what you're really doing is you're not trying to push the person's button to anger them. What you're doing is you're trying to poke at a perspective that you don't have. And you're trying to like basically, just needle at it going, okay, what am I missing? Like, I hear what you're saying, but I cannot see that perspective. So maybe I need to ask the question this way or that way. And so that can feel combative. But like you said, done respectfully, done where there's trust in the fact that we're going to wade into some uncharted waters, but we're okay. We're not going to go too far. Yeah, I mean, that can lead to a lot of insight.
Some of that we set up intentionally with the podcast. When I first brought up the podcast idea, I think she thought more like it was going to be like Crossfire, like we're going to argue with each other, like argue with each other. And I said, let's do this. Let's intentionally set out from the start with wide open. Like, so, one of the first episodes we did was Ask My Black Friend. And it was, I'm going to ask you things that I've always wondered about Black culture, but I was always hesitant or some kind of reserved to ask. I didn't really have anybody to ask. And you tell me if I'm ridiculous, but let's go for it. And we did that. Wide open discussion was great until we got with the lighthearted things. The more controversial things were more difficult, as you would expect. But I think setting the table is important to say, you know what, I want to know, and I want my mind to be open enough to learn something. So if you go into the conversation saying, I want to change your mind, is different than going into the conversation and saying, like you said, there's something I may be missing here, help me fill in the blanks, and then, you could present your side, and I can tell you where that really doesn't compute with me, but at the same time, I'm not here just to ram my point of view down your throat. I'm here to listen as much as I am to talk.
Yep. Yeah, and that's, the discourse that happens then is... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I just said I dare you to go on Twitter and find it. Find that kind of, or even on Facebook now, find that kind of willingness to say, you know what, I didn't see it that way.
It's a really true point, and I don't want to keep hammering the political kind of thing, only because I know you have so much more that we can talk about. But to your point,
sure.
What I've noticed in doing some of these podcasts is the reason I think so many people, I don't want to say so many, but I think the reason you don't see it in other platforms is because it takes work, right? I mean, you have to mentally be flexible enough to do it, but more importantly, you got to have the time. I mean, when do you
Yeah.
really have the time to sit down for 30 minutes? I mean, look at the general news outlets today. I mean, it's
Yeah.
soundbite after soundbite. I mean, nobody really gets to dig in, sit in the silence, mull over an
Right.
idea, and then reply. It's at a much faster rate, and so I think just reactions are what you get for answers, and not really,
Yeah.
thoughtful prose. But
Right.
no, I mean it's. Go ahead.
What I see a lot of is, especially like on Twitter, people will see a comment on Twitter. They'll go to the person's Twitter bio, get all of the information they think they need to know about that person, so put them in their little box, and then look at the comment through that perspective, and then respond with whatever the canned response should be to a person like that. So if you see a person who calls himself a conservative, boom, you already know what they think, you already know what they feel, you already know everything you need to know about their life experience, so you have your little quiver full of replies, and you're just going to shoot one over, and they do the same thing to you. They look at you and they say, oh, not you, Matt, but you, other person on Twitter. They
Right.
say, oh, this person, is a big fan of Barack Obama, so I already know everything there is to know about them, and this is where their point of view comes from. So I've got a ready-made jab to shoot back at them, and that's what's happening now. Because, like you said, there's no time to sit down and learn a person. We have these nice little boxes that we can put everybody in now in the political sphere that tells you everything you think you need to know about them.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, from that actually working out that way.
Yeah.
Oh, so to switch things up a little bit, so
Yeah.
the concealed carry stuff. I think we were talking a little bit back, and I remember you denoting there were some changes in the laws and stuff like that, but not really to
Yep.
go into the laws and the technicalities. But so how did you get into instructing within this, and what have you learned from being an instructor of people that are coming in who maybe have a lot of knowledge or zero knowledge about firearms? What have you learned just in general about teaching those kind of classes?
It's funny. So it's kind of my opener to every class. So spoiler alert: if you're going to take my class, you're going to hear this story again. But when I was in the Marines, and I grew up shooting guns, and Grandpa taking us out, target shooting, and all that kind of stuff, like many Kentucky boys from Kentucky did. And then I went in the Marine Corps, and I got to shoot all the cool stuff, and I got to shoot machine guns and grenade launchers and 50 caliber, machine guns that have been around since World War II, and all that cool stuff, anti-tank weapons and all that, and that was awesome. But once I got out of the Marines, I kind of set that aside. Honestly, I kind of forgot. I kind of forgot about guns. It might be a silly way to put it, but I did. I just it just wasn't at top of mind to go target shooting or anything like that. I was trying to build a career, got married, all that kind of stuff. Had a first kid, but then my wife said, we need to start going to church again. We need to start going to church at all. She was raised Catholic. I was raised Southern Baptist, and we were looking for a church. So we found this church, and we went to this church for about a year, and we're still there now. This is 13, 14, almost years later. And the pastor came on one Sunday morning, and he was talking about, we got a big church. It's like 1,000 people, over 3 services. We need help. We need people to serve on the church. So, we need people to work in the nursery. We need people to help in parking in the morning and all that kind of stuff. And so he also mentioned a safety and security team. So I said, that kind of piqued my interest, because he said it was only open at the time to current and former or retired military or law enforcement. So I said, okay, that's cool. So I applied to be on the safety and security team at the church, and I was accepted. Well, one of the things that they said was, oh, by the way, if you're going to be on this team, you have to have a concealed carry permit. So I got into concealed carry through my church, which is, you know, it's an unusual way to get there. So a friend of mine from high school, she taught the course. I went to this course, terrible course, the state course, but I went through it. I got my concealed carry permit. Now, about a year later, the Kentucky State Legislature said that, you know, if you submit a curriculum and we approve it, you don't have to go through this horrible, boring state course. You can teach your own course. So I got my instructor's credentials. I joined an association that had already had their curriculum approved, and I started teaching their curriculum in 2015. So this is going on my 4th year of being a concealed carry instructor. What I've learned, to answer that part of your question, I'm a car guy, you know that, and I thought there was nothing that people think they know more about and don't than cars. And then I started teaching people how to shoot. And I can't tell you, I don't know what it is, but people think they know so much more than they know about guns, about how to handle guns, about the fundamentals of shooting, you know. And they were kind of like me, you know, Granddaddy taught me how to shoot when I was 6, so I know everything there is to know about guns. And that was number one. People think they know way more than they know about guns and shooting. Number two, the number of people who came to my course, and I'll never reveal their names, but it came to my course and said, I've been carrying my whole life, I finally just wanted to make it legal. So those are the two things that really surprised me the most being a concealed carry instructor.
Yeah, I could definitely see the second one being far more eye-opening than the first. I mean, you know,
Right.
When I think about the first, I think about people who I hop in the car with, and I'm like, you've had a license for how long?
Right.
You know,
Exactly
really,
right.
I mean, you're just going to parallel park. It's I know it'll take a couple, but it's not that terribly difficult. And so,
Yeah, it's not that big a deal. Yeah.
Right. No, that's definitely interesting. So if we talk about the way you know, the teaching the course and stuff like that. So you had the state course that was extremely dry and painful, as you stated.
Yeah.
What do you guys do within your course to make it, I don't always say fun, but at least more interactive and memorable of the important points?
Okay. Well, let me put it in perspective. So the state course is basically, you would go in, you would sit down, they would put on DVDs of lawyers from the state who worked at the State House, and they would sit in front of a camera at their desk, and they would read a section of the law about deadly force. And then it would fade out, and it would fade back in, and there'd be a different lawyer at a different desk, and that lawyer would read a section of the law into the camera. And that was the bulk of concealed carry for a long, long time. So until they, you know, and then you would do a short little section on shooting fundamentals and a short little thing on holsters, you know, that kind of stuff. And then you would go shoot your rounds at a range, and, you know, a handful of rounds into a target, and that was it. And the course, you know, I feel bad because my friend was the one who was teaching the course, and she did a great job of administering the requirement, but at the same time, the course, like, she had no hope because the course was just ridiculous. So when the curriculum requirements opened up to people who could submit their own, then we had some people who were real firearms enthusiasts and concealed carry guys. Like they call themselves sheepdogs, and, you know, guys who, and it's almost all guys. There's a handful of women, but it's almost all guys. They started really getting into some genuine
what do you need to know to be an effective concealed carrier? And as long as it, ticked the boxes on the requirements for the state. So the state said, you had to have a written test, you had to have in-person training, you had to have a live fire thing, and you had to talk about cleaning firearms, because people tend to shoot themselves when they're cleaning firearms or shoot their wives, is the joke I always say. More
Right.
wives have been
Fair.
shot in the kitchen by a guy, quote unquote, cleaning a firearm. So we were. I thought I could be a good instructor, but I just did not want to teach that state course. So when the state course came about, then I jumped in. I mean, when the state allowed other curriculum to come in, I jumped in.
Right. The kind of a revised version of that. Do you think with having people that enjoy the trade or have at least a more using mastery of the topic being taught, do you think that's what makes the biggest difference? Is like you said, they're excited, but I mean, it's pretty much the same content. So do you think it has more to do with the people that are actually implementing it and how they're teaching it? That's creating a more effective, I guess, end product?
No, it's not the same content in that I don't teach the law. The state requires that we give the students a copy of the law, and they have to affirm that they've received a copy of the law when they go to apply for their actual permit. I don't teach the law because I'm not a lawyer, and I don't think the state really wants me to teach the law. They want me to, as a competent person, as someone who is a certified instructor, to say, okay, this person knows which end of a firearm that the round comes out of, and they can safely handle a firearm. They know something about safely storing a firearm, because most of my course is safe handling, safe storage, how to keep your hands or your kids' hands off a gun, or anybody else you don't want to have it. That's what most of my course is. And then shooting fundamentals, the state wants me to be able to certify that these people can hit a target more often than not, right? So it's pretty much just that. They know that the odds of someone getting into a deadly force situation where they're going to have to use a gun are very slim. So they just want some kind of confirmation that this person can handle a gun safely before they get their permit. Now, just this, I think yesterday or today, the governor of Kentucky has signed what's called constitutional carry, and people don't have to take my course anymore to carry concealed within the state lines of Kentucky. So we'll see what happens with my business there. But that was the idea going in. And if you want to carry in a reciprocal state outside of Kentucky, you still have to get the Kentucky permit. So
Gotcha.
hopefully I'll be teaching people who care enough to be trained and or people who want to carry outside of the state of Kentucky.
No, that's definitely interesting on how basically I agree. I mean, what you really did is you tore it down and said, okay, what are the most important areas where something can go wrong, and then let's basically put training in place to make sure that doesn't happen.
Exactly.
No, that seems like a great way that at least it got reworked. Sounds like you got to your destination in your car.
I'm here.
Cool. Well, then I don't want to.
time.
I was to say I don't want to keep you too much longer. I always want to be respectful of everybody's time.
Sure.
But is there any? I don't have to end it, but because I'm really enjoying talking to you. Actually, we can always do like a part 2, part 3, and just continue this out in the future sometime.
I'm down for that.
I'll just catch you when you're driving down to Alabama. We'll do like a 6-hour marathon.
We could do it because I have plenty of time for that.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the last things that I'm trying to bring up and incorporate more into these conversations is, the journey that people go through, so on and so forth, what they've learned. But do you have any habits? And we'll leave on this question. But do you have any habits or things that you have found yourself doing that really add a lot of value to the output of your day? I mean, you pick whatever output means as far as what's important to you. But do you see things that you do that are habitual and really help your, your performance and output?
In general, it's I'm a firm believer in putting together goals, short-term and long-term goals, and every day, whether it's in the morning or whether it's, on my way home, kind of gauging where I am as far, am I doing something today that's going to lead me towards that long-term goal or even that short-term goal? Is what I'm going to do today or what I have done yet so far today moving me towards that goal or not? And if the answer is no, then it's time to re-examine what I'm prioritizing. That's my thing. You have to have a set goal that has, you write it down. It has achievable landmarks where you can say, okay, I got to do A, B, and C to get to D, and it has to have a genuine time frame around it. You can't just say at some point I would like to, whatever it is, lose 30 pounds. Well, okay, I want to lose 30 pounds in 6 months, and what does that mean? How many hours in the gym do I have to do between now and then, yada, yada, to get me there? So that's what I do, and constantly thinking about, is what I'm doing right now going to get me to that goal, or should I put this lower on a priority list? That's as general as I can make it, but that's
awesome. I mean,
something I try to do every day.
Yeah, and I like it because when you explain it that way, I mean, it's the act of pursuing the goal is what takes probably the most work, but really what's even more important is evaluating where are you and what work do I need to put in at that time. It's a great, I had a conversation with somebody else about this where how do you keep yourself out of the busy trap and stay productive? Because a lot of people, if they don't realize it, default to busy and they just call that productive when it's really not. That's definitely a great habit and takeaway to leave everybody with. So, hey, I appreciate your time. I'm glad you got to your destination, safe and sound. And we will definitely pick this up sometime in the future to do a little longer format or maybe some different topics and stuff like that. But Jacob, I appreciate the time. I'm glad we had a chance to connect.
Thank you, Matt. I'd love to do it. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks, man.
I hope everybody found that as interesting as I did. Jacob's a stand-up guy. Really enjoy talking with him and definitely plan on doing something like this again in the future. Maybe it's something we'll do in his long road trips that he has for work every so often. Again, if you like this show, leave a comment, a like, 5 stars, thumbs up, whatever it happens to be out in the interwebs. You can follow me on Instagram at DevittMatt. You can also follow me on Twitter under the same handle, as well as over on LinkedIn. Just look up Matt Devitt, Devitt. And I will be putting out this on a couple of different platforms as soon as I can, just to see how that gets going. But once again, hope you guys are enjoying this. More episodes are going to be rolling out shortly. And just remember, growth happens between dawn and dusk. Take care.